I have to clarify a couple of lifestyle choices. I live in the city. I live next door to where I work. I live at 198 and I work at 200. I don't own a car. I have a yacht and I catch the tram from my house to my yacht, and usually spend Friday and Saturday night on the yacht with my son. And every Thursday night, don't bother calling me, because I'll be out sailing with my very close friends, where we drink and sail and solve all the world's problems and then forget next day. And so we have to do it all again the next week. 50,000 years from the hand axe to the axe with a handle on it. So for many generations, young sons were there putting a handle on and saying, look at this, Dad, and this, don't do that, this has been good enough for so many years. And eventually somebody succeeded in keeping the handle on the axe. 50,000 years. So then
we only just got wheels on suitcases.
Wright brothers, when did they fly? 1908.
I was in the Air Force, I should have known that.
I'm disappointed that you didn't jump in there.
Then we landed on the moon in 1960. 50,000 years to put a stick on a stone.
Yeah, exponential growth.
And then and that's what's happening now. The younger generations haven't had that tactile, emotional taste, smell, sound, everything that goes together in creating that. You're carving a piece of jelly tongue, and as you progress through there, you've got the shape the way that you want it, and then oops, I've gone too far. That isn't there with the computer.
Case in point, some years ago I met the machinist. He was a toolmaker and he went to work at a notable university. His role was to do any of the machining, mill and lathing work for the engineering students, because the engineering students were not considered to be mature enough to operate mill or lathe at a university level. And so if they wanted anything done, he had to do all of their milling work. They should have been pumping out on a daily basis, was now taking, I need this person to do this, can I book this in? And it wasn't going to be done for about 3 months.
Welcome to Tales from the Top. Today our guest is Andrew Rogers. Andrew is a leader in the Australian industrial design field with nearly 40 years of experience creating innovative and enduring products. Andrew's passion for design started back in 1976. Inspired by his teacher, he pursued his passion, earning a degree in industrial design in 1984. His early career saw him designing for major companies like Shell and Clipsal. Over the years, Andrew has designed and developed over 300 products spanning industries such as architecture, education, healthcare, and electronics. In 1988, he founded his own company, ARID, a firm dedicated to delivering innovative, user-centered solutions that blend creativity, engineering, and technology. His contributions have earned him multiple design awards, a Design Institute of Australia Fellowship, and a respected place as a leader and advocate for industrial design profession. Today, we'll dive into Andrew's career, his design philosophy, and how great design shapes the way we all live and work. Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Tales from the Top.
Thank you.
We like a good origin story on Tales from the Top. So perhaps we could start at the beginning. How did you find yourself in this fine land, Australia?
My family, we lived in England. So I went to a little Anglican church school at the top of Reculver Towers, just in Kent. Age of 6, I got told I had to go and get some vaccinations, and I had no idea what they were for. And then I was told a week later we went and visited Australia House, and we then got onto what I was told to be a boat. But my mother, we were in Southampton, and my mother says, there's the boat. And all I could see was this huge wall of steel, white steel with little rivets or big rivets on it and a few round holes on it. Had no idea what she was talking about. So got on this into this monster of a building. And then a couple of weeks later, we ended up in Cape Town, went to the top of Table Mountain, cable car up there, and I looked down, and my mother said, there's the boat down there. And that's the first time I actually realised what the boat looked like.
Wow.
The Australis it was.
Really?
Converted.
The Australis.
Australis.
That's the same ship my family came out on.
Well, it's a small world.
Yeah, there you go. Wow. Okay. So that was, my family came out in 72.
Which we were probably on the same boat at the same time. Yeah.
Wow.
I can't remember if it was 71 or 72.
Okay. So my sisters were 8 years old, and my parents came out for 2 years.
Okay.
And yeah, they're here, still.
No, I don't know. I was 6, so what's 60, 63. It was 70, 71. Yeah.
Wow.
Probably we arrived just before Christmas, and then caught the overlander across from Melbourne.
Oh, from Melbourne. So
Fremantle, then Melbourne, and then caught the train. And my mother said, "Oh my God, what are we doing here? What is this godforsaken place?"
Yeah,
that's amazing. I'll have to ask my folks. I don't know about. I know they landed in Perth, and I know they went to Cape Town on the way through. So because I know we've spoken before, but the sewers was closed. You went round. So, wow, that's amazing. You could have been on the same.
So the sewers was closed. You went around Cape of Good Hope.
Yes.
Wow, that would have been very interesting.
I have seen photos. I've got a photo of Mum and Dad on the wall on the ship, like Dad with his purple collar and ruffles. By this massive buffet. And I've seen a photo of.
Hang on, are we talking 1780?
No. And when they cross
the equator, they
chuck everyone in the pool.
And they'd shaving cream and all sorts of stuff. It was
hilarious.
It was great fun. But I went to school on the boat. That was
really.
And there was like 3 theatres and 2 swimming pools.
Yeah,
and
great.
It was huge. It was a hospital ship. That converted, and I tracked it down. Anyway, yeah,
that would have been quite intimidating as a 6-year-old. I think, and I have recollections of being that age, and a couple of memories of being that sort of 5, 6, and that are quite outstanding. But to be told we're going to go on that thing. And there's this huge thing that looks like a building. You presume it is.
Well, I couldn't work out what she was talking about. It was just like,
and then all of a sudden you're on it, and you can't leave that building. It's like, I remember when I went to hospital, I was about 6 or 7. I had my tonsils out, and it was a similar thing where I didn't really understand what was going on. But so for that to happen, then all of a sudden you're in Australia.
Yeah, and then the next memory is. We had a house that was the only house on our side of the road, and coming home from school and finding 20 sheep in the back garden.
Wow! Did you come from a 2 up, 2 down?
Yeah. And then at Tea Tree Gully, and it was hot and dry. And
wow,
it was different. That was for sure.
Yeah,
but I don't remember that much about school. Other than eventually getting to high school. So got to high school in year 9 or 10.
And where did you go to high school?
Banksia Park.
Okay.
Now Banksia Park International School.
Oh, okay. Back then it was Banksia Park Reform School for naughty boys.
Today's episode is sponsored by us, Chiron Audio and Devison Design.
At Chiron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike 3-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Chiron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Chiron.
Devison Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Devison Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Devison Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show.
No, it was pretty good. It was a new form of school. It was open. They had divided up into humanities and science, and it was quite good as far as schools went at that stage. They had an amazing arts centre, so they had fine arts, tech studies, and they were one of the few design courses.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky back then to be introduced to design. I learnt a little bit about design from Hugo. Hugo Silver was his name, was my high school teacher. And one day he came in and said, this is industrial design. Do you know what industrial design is? no idea. And he brought in these renderings of some air conditioners, like wall-mounted air conditioners, and they were with Canson renderings with beautiful white lines and shading and highlights in them.
So these were hand drawn, probably watercolors with.
Yes, well, with markers and paint and gouache. So I went from there, and he really helped me. So I went through. I got something like 98 for design and 12 for chemistry. Wasn't that bad, but no. I got through my matric and then went to Underdale, got interviewed by Ron Corso, who tried to convince me to become a design teacher. Mm-hmm. And then I got interviewed by some other Phil, I can't remember his name now, but they convinced me to do design.
So you must have been at Underdale at pretty much the year it kicked off, because Underdale was the centre of graphic design and I presume industrial design then. But I know that when I looked at going to graphic design in the 80s, it was a school that looked like it was still brand new.
It was. Tom Dunstan had raided the coffers and built an amazing structure there. Bob Miller-Smith, who organised the degree, he actually went and saw Tonkin at the time in Houses of Help and convinced them to create a degree for design, which is the first time in the world that actually had a design degree. It used to be a Bachelor of Arts, now it's actually a Bachelor of Design.
Oh, that first time South Australia?
In the world, yeah. So there was a design school in 1823 in South Australia, so Bob Miller-Smith organised that, and he modelled the whole school around the Bauhaus. So the first year we did 5 subjects, so did jewellery design, graphic design, illustration, industrial design, ceramics. Yeah, so we did all of those subjects. Then we had to split. So the first 2 months was common course, where we just had to learn how to draw and all of those things, and then went into the other subjects. And I swung very much away from industrial design towards jewellery, and they were very keen to get me into jewellery, and I got talked out of it because they asked me if I had anyone in the family that had diamond mines or gold mines, and when they said no, they said, well, you probably need to find something that's a little bit more industrial, and convinced me to do industrial design. But I still enjoy doing the jewellery, and if you ever get to my workshop, you'll see I've got a lot of jewellery tools, and I make jewellery for my wife and my family. And
now, I was very privileged to visit your workshop with Lee. Was it about 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
And I have to say, I like a nice workshop, and I like my workshop, but my workshop is more heavier fabrication.
Dirty.
Your workshop, dirty. There's a moderate level of organisation, and organisation is something that occurs on an annual basis.
Yeah.
But your workshop is surgical and clinical and passionate. Clinical in so much as that it is precise and organised. But to qualify that is passionate. You can see the passion. It's incredible.
I think what happens is when I'm working, I design. There's a certain physicality when I design. So I make things. So I design. I come up with ideas. I use the computer. I use the pencil. I use a chisel. I use whatever I need at that particular point in time to get the inspiration out into the object. Now my workshop. There's a method in the madness of it being so perfectly organised. I don't tidy up my workshop. I have a staff member that goes around after me and clears up all the mess. And the reason the illusion, the reason that I have like the tools are in individual compartments is so that I know exactly where they are. So at an instant,
and if anything's missing,
and in an instant, I can drag them out and I can actually get on and do the work. So I don't have to think about where are the keys. So I don't have to think about where's the chisel, where's the... Yeah.
Now, your workshop's very similar.
It's not as organised as his.
No, but it's probably halfway between ours.
Yeah, I would say it's in between.
Yeah.
Can we go back a step? Could you define for the listener, because a lot of people probably don't even know what an industrial designer is.
Okay. So an industrial designer is a designer that's involved in the human to machine interface. And by that, what I mean is that engineers and mechanics and industries make machinery and equipment. And when I talk about a machine is anything that's mechanical. So it can be the microphone, a glass, a fork, any implement that a human being uses I consider to be a machine or a product. And so industrial designers create the difference between what is the roughest hewn piece of material to get the job done, turn it into something that you enjoy picking up and you're comfortable with, and you intrinsically understand what it's used for as soon as you look at it. So I feel that I've achieved the most success when what I've designed is invisible. If somebody doesn't notice the product that I've designed, I think I've been most successful.
Is that the difference between art and design? Art, we want to be seen. Design is a practical application of a problem solving.
I think design can still be artistic, and I think it can have an aesthetic that people enjoy participating in. But I think as long as the practical functionality of the product is flawless, and by that I mean the light switch, you walk in and you intrinsically understand how to turn it on. You don't have to get the manual out. Yeah. If you need to get the manual out, I think that there's a number of shortcomings in that.
Right, so my printer is definitely not good design.
I'm not sure.
Actually, you just mentioned the light switch, so let's go there, because it's probably one of your most famous designs, isn't it?
I'm not sure about famous. It's probably it's what happened was I go back one step before that. I graduated from design school. Mm-hmm. I worked at Kelvinator for a little period of time designing refrigerators, and left there because I got a better opportunity with Shell, because someone asked me if I could design buildings, and I said, of course I can. And
good answer.
Went to the library and borrowed some books.
That's pretty much where I guess Stan, he said exactly the same thing 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about the platform.
Yeah.
Yes is the answer.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can you do that? Yes.
Can you design an elephant? Yes.
So
when can you start? Give me a week.
You say yes, and I turned up with my pens and my compass and had all the tools, so they assumed I could do the job. Was working was Shell House on North Terrace. Yeah.
Tell me, so hang on, you were involved in the design of Shell House?
No, I worked in Shell House.
Because Shell House has been there for a long time. My great-grandmother...
He's not that old.
My great-grandmother was there. My grandmother was there for some Bible study classes as Shell House was transitioning. I have a bookcase at home.
It's amazing piece of architecture.
Which comes from there. So, but absolutely, the architecture is absolutely...
It's an amazing piece of nouveau architecture. Yeah. We even had a lift operator.
Fantastic.
In the morning. So you'd walk in and you'd walk up the steps. And the first time I went in there, I was just, oh my God. Lucky I was wearing...
Good morning, sir. Which floor, please?
I was wearing a suit, and they said, and you walk across the Shell emblem on the floor, walk up to this polished brass gate, which they open and close, and whisks me up to the top, and I meet the managing director of Shell South Australia and sit down and have a chat, and then go down to the design office, which was 6 drawing boards and an engineering manager, and I had my technical pens and my compass, and sat down and started designing aviation refueling facilities at Yalara for Jet A1 refueling of aeroplanes. Was it road train refueling stations? Yeah, right. So Tail and Bend, I designed all of the Tail and Bend truck refueling station. They flew me up to Uluru, because I said I really need to see what I'm doing. and they looked at me like, why? Yeah. And so they flew me up, got a helicopter across from the airport, which was away from where the new airport was going to be. And they landed and they said, "Here you go." And I said, "Okay, I understand now why you asked me why I need to come here, because it was just flat red dirt."
Right.
But that was interesting that they actually indulged you.
Oh,
So they must have actually, when they indulged you, they must have thought, this is the person we need, and we see something in him. So let's indulge him, because I wonder if they were thinking he could do great things or he could do good things, or so they must have had confidence in you to indulge you like that.
Glad you think that. I think it was just the petroleum companies, and they have lots of money, and they and
But that's contrary to a good manager, though. A good manager who's watching his bottom line is not going to think, "Oh, whatever, we'll just send him."
I think
thought
partially. I think that there's two reasons there. One is they wanted me to actually experience what it was that I was doing.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing, and we needed to build a refueling facility for jets, and it's in the middle of Australia, and it hadn't been done before. There's not. Here I was,
I want to know
20 years old,
Yeah.
and designing turning circles for jumbo jets on.
Where do you start with that? I mean, like, it's easier to bluff now. You've got the internet, you've got YouTube, you've got all these references. Back in the day, you've got a crappy set of encyclopedia, if you're lucky, and a bunch of really knowledgeable guys. Was it just a matter of hunting out good information?
Well, I went to the airport and found a couple of pilots and talked to them about what the turning circle, literally, what's the turning circle of a jumbo jet?
Mm-hmm.
How do we work out once it comes off the runway because you're putting 60,000 litre tanks in the ground, and you've got to put a spout which basically connects underneath an aeroplane. And if you get it in the wrong place...
At 115 octane.
Yeah.
And if you breathe the wrong way, all you have is a 500 square metre hole.
It's only kerosene. It's not quite that bad.
Okay.
So it was amazing, an absolutely amazing experience. But the reality was, they just laid down this huge expanse of tarmac, and they put the tanks in and put the refueling points in, and we spaced them far enough apart so two jumbo jets could park next to each other and still. And then once you work that out, anything smaller can actually fit in there. So
yeah,
it sounds like the job of an engineer, though, rather than industrial designer.
It was, but I guess I was willing to take the challenge.
Yeah,
I mean,
cool.
I was working with engineers.
Yeah.
And remember, this is pre-CAD. There was no CAD. There was no internet.
Yeah.
We had one little PC, which
and your printer's got HB written on it.
Yeah, that's right. Or no, I had rotring pens and with all the numbers on them, different thicknesses, and the black ink. We had a computer there, and we had an engineer who was seconded between Darwin and Adelaide, and he let me play with his computer, and I wrote a program. I had this really complex task, which was working out how many seats and tables I could fit in the dining area of the truck station. And this is think about McDonald's dining, and you've got to work out where the seats are and how many you can fit.
So this is your introduction to practical application of nesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
So trying to work out how to fit them in there. So I could have drawn up all of these, but no. So I went and wrote a little program, and this program told me the spacing and how many I could put in there. And then I went back and presented that to the managing director, and he was most impressed that I could put 16 tables in instead of 14 tables. So, drew it all up, and then the carpenters came in and they followed my drawings and didn't quite follow my drawings, and
that sounds familiar.
Didn't quite fit. So number of discussions
Calm
later.
down.
That's all right. I'm calming down. It's all right. Calming down.
But
more time for more wine.
But it was great. It was really eye opening about the real world, and I got paid really well, and I had a really, really nice opportunity. But there was something missing from it. I wasn't an architect, and I'd had fun while I was doing it, and I really felt I should stay true to my colours and do some design work. So
Yeah.
what happened at the same time is I had gone through a book which I found in the library, which listed all the companies in South Australia. And that there's a directory, it doesn't exist anymore. And I went through and I got up to G and wrote a letter to Robert Gerard. And I just wrote this letter and typed it up on my typewriter, introduced myself. And got a call from, I can't remember his name now, but got a call from one of the marketing guys and said, "Oh, you come in and we'll have a chat." So I go in, walk in, talk to these guys, and can you design a light switch? Yeah, of course.
Can I just ask you to talk a bit more into the box?
Sorry.
Yeah.
And then, so I said, of course I can, and went home. And by this time I was living in Carrington Street with a group of nurses, and I'd built a bench at the back, as you do, workshop, and had a few chisels, and got a vice.
So where were Mum and Dad at this time that you're living in Carrington Street?
They were in
Have you
Teacher
moved
Gully.
out of home?
Yeah, I'd moved out.
Right,
so I moved out 2 weeks after I graduated. So I was living in Carrington Street, and my kitchen table became my model making space. So I did some sketches, and I handmade a model of light switches, which this was 85 or 85, I think it was, 1985.
Okay.
So I designed the 2000 range of light switches, which was very futuristic for 1985, year 2000. Designed those and took them in, presented the renderings to them, which were hand-drawn renderings with markers on canson paper, with highlights, with white pencil and gouache on them. They thought they were pretty good, and kept on badgering me to go and work for them. And I turned them down a few times. And then they convinced me to go and work there. So I went in to a factory environment, and it really emotionally drained me significantly. A couple of things happened. They gave me a clock card to clock on, which I never used. So I was there for nearly 2 years, and I never clocked on or clocked off once in the whole time. And it wasn't until the day that I left that the guy who's supposed to be my supervisor came up to me and said, "You've never clocked on." I said,
"And you still paid me."
So, but that it was disheartening. The office environment was horrendous.
Yeah.
We worked in a 50s style drawing office with drawing machines and pen and ink, and
no windows.
Well, we had windows, but we didn't have colour markers. So there was like, what do you want colour for? You
just write red. You write blue.
Yeah, and you draw the lines, and the 2000 range was the first product that they'd ever made that used CNC machining on it. So they didn't have CNC machining in house. They sent it out to a company in South Australia that bought a CNC machine.
So what year is this, Andrew?
This
is 85?
85, 86, yeah.
Okay.
They and part of the 2000 range is the radius on the PowerPoint is 2000 millimeters.
Right.
So that's where the 2000 comes from. There's nothing to do with the year 2000. So that radius, spherical radius on the front of it was put on with the CNC milling machine.
Cool.
And then I spent...
We know now.
Yeah.
There are 3 people in the world who know, maybe 4.
What's the radius of this light switch? 2000 millimeters.
Possibly there's 5, and 4 of them are in this room.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually 14,000 are now listed.
But that's the extraordinary thing, isn't it? Like, you built something that you'd have to say everyone in Australia's touched.
Oh.
And
they're in every art gallery. They're in every museum.
Yeah.
They're in every house.
I've specified them in houses I've designed over the past 20 years.
And they're still the biggest selling product range that they make. So
that's pretty cool.
It's really cool. I wish I'd said I'd do it for nothing and they can give me $1 for every one.
Even if it was 5 cents.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, a bit more than 5 cents.
an interesting parallel to that is Don Panos. Don Panos, he invented the slow release application for medications. And so he ended up receiving about 1 or 2 cents for every tablet that's ever been taken that has some form of slow release. So when I was in motorsport in the 90s, he came over to Adelaide to suggest that they would like to, Don Panos wanted to create the Petit Le Mans series in Adelaide, which is a mini Le Mans, 6-hour Le Mans series, and a particular range of cars. And so the point is that if you come up with something brilliant, if you use the application of your intellect in a creative way that ends up achieving something fundamental, whether it's a light switch or whether it's medication or whether it's a new shoelace, anyone who's actually contemplating design, industrial design, and getting into it, I think that's an inspirational story that we can actually impart to young people that are trying to get into it, that if you actually do come up with something, don't necessarily settle for a wage, maybe challenge the status quo and ask for a little upfront and maybe get that 1%.
Well, I got paid $5,000 for designing it.
In 1985.
How many units have they sold now?
I couldn't estimate.
Yeah.
But I got far more from Clipsal than that. I got 18 months immersion in manufacturing.
Yeah.
In fact, I got repeatedly reprimanded for not being at my drawing board. The toolmakers loved me. The people in the office thought I was
Skiving off.
Yeah.
So that's where you went to that Remand school.
That's
in
right.
Baxi Park.
Yeah. So I would be there at 7 in the morning, and they're still there at 5 in the afternoon with the afternoon shift of the tool makers, and going to the tool trials and telling them, yeah, put some transparent material in the tool. What for? I want to be able to see what it looks like so I can see through it. And so they would do that for me, and they'd bring it up, and someone said, that looks pretty good. And the managing director would run off with it and go and show somebody with it. It was a great, absolutely great time, but I think I was not understood. And I think there was another thing that I felt that happened to me, and I think it happens to a lot of people. I truly believed that everybody had the same level of intelligence. I got a rude awakening. A little
When
bit.
you first went out into public.
Well, no. I was in denial for a number of years, and then suddenly it came. One day I realised, no, I really should tell people that these really minor details that I think are just everybody's aware of. I need to explain those details to them, and that was a very rude shock to me. I thought, I understood that some people were stronger and faster and fitter and could lift heavier things, but I didn't really realize that some people understand things quicker or understand things in more detail. I thought that was just...
Or even see things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that that's what everybody did. I didn't think there was anything different or special about anything that I knew.
I think we've all
understood.
had clients that cannot relate a two-dimensional drawing to a three-dimensional solution.
At all.
They
At
don't
all.
see that.
No, they can't.
And I've got people, I'll draw houses and I'll design a room or a space or a building, and they don't get it until we make a model.
Yeah.
And then they see it. But they still don't get the
I don't
3D.
think that's a rarity. I really don't. I actually think
don't.
I actually think that's the norm, and I actually think it's a trained thing. Like you have to train your
think it's
brain to be
actually
able to do that.
For building design, for me, I think it's more like 80%, because as soon as I've designed something, say, I love it, that's wonderful, let's build it. Oh, I didn't think it was going to look like that. Where am I going to put my vanity?
Yeah.
But I think you're going it from the wrong direction. What you have in your mind is or what I have in my mind is an idea of what it's going to look like, how it's going to work. my next step is to communicate that the best way that I can. And
Yes.
in some ways it's a drawing. Now, who you present it to is at a severe disadvantage because they don't have the spatial understandings of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
They don't understand the textures and the finishes and the feel and the smell and all of those other things that are going on in your head.
Yeah.
All you've done is you've taken that entire ecosystem that you understand and you've given them a very poor rendition on a piece of paper.
So if the client fails to understand, it's really our fault.
Absolutely, yes. I'm sorry, but it is.
Look, I agree. I have come to learn that in time that it's been my failing. I'm going to say it's Lee's failing because I don't know. I mean, for sure. That
Well, it's actually interesting you mentioned that because Jade and I have been working together on a project of late, and there is a next level of difficulty of interpreting someone else's ideas into yours, as opposed to when you get in a flow state and you've got it, it's there.
Well, we're doing that transition at the moment, as you say.
Exactly, it's your design.
I have the vision, and I'm communicating that vision.
Yeah.
In Word and pencil sketches, very simple pencil sketches, because we have an efficiency of time we want to manage.
Yep.
And I'm relating that to someone who can and understands. And so then I think, and look, today we talked about it.
Yes, yeah.
And I thought, why don't you understand that? You actually speak the same language.
Yeah.
And so we had that thing just between two people who understand design, let alone the person who understands design and then the client who has no concept.
There's a historical example of that. Gaudi, he designed what I believe is the world's most amazing piece of architecture.
For those who don't know, what's that?
The familiar.
Okay.
In
Brazil.
Barcelona.
Brazil, yeah.
I mean, he learnt and understood arches, creating things in the reverse of gravity to fight against gravity. So
that model's amazing.
He created with chains. He hung chains to create parabolas, which when they hang, he worked out that if you then invert them, they give the strongest structure, which nobody knew that before.
Can we bring that up? Marcus, can you?
We can't at the moment, but yeah, I definitely recommend people do because there's a beautiful model of it at the Familiar, isn't there?
And he's a mirror. There's a mirror underneath.
Yeah.
And he's used cloth and string and weights to create the model. But he didn't just draw. He was there with his hammer and chisel and sculpting and working. And he met his demise because he was walking back to check the perspective of something that he created and got run over by a tram.
Yeah, wow. And that's kind of like what you were talking about with your ship when you were 6 years old.
What a great way to go, though.
Well, no, he would have lived. Yeah. But he was dressed and covered in dust, and they thought it was a pauper, so took him to the paupers' hospital instead of to the good hospital where the good drugs are.
But I mean, it's the most incredible bit. Like the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, "Really?" Like it looks gaudy and all of that type of stuff.
What does it look?
Sorry,
gaudy.
Yeah. But as you drill down into it, it's just the most remarkable. And what's it been 100 years being built?
100 years, but most cathedrals take in excess of 100, 125 years. So the New York, I think the New York cathedral's finished now, but it's only finished recently. Canterbury, obviously, for a long time, but and it's got the tubular bells, which haven't even worked out how to build them yet. But it's just an amazing piece, and all of the work that he did. The ergonomics, the human scale of how he thought. You dream of being so obsessed, but he was totally obsessed. But he had someone who was willing to support him. He was paid to go and be creative, and that doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen now very often.
Who did? Was it the church or the government?
No. There was somebody from. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody who had a lot of money, who was involved in developing Barcelona. So, and I'm scratching my head at the moment trying to think of the name of the of the promenade and the house. They built a housing estate basically, and it was all in his style. And he created the gatehouse, and there's the aqueducts, and there's this huge promenade, and I can't remember what it's called. But that was a housing development for the developers, and they sponsored him to do that. And at the same time, he was developing
But that's what's missing so much in modern society. I mean, you look back into like music, especially, because I'm always going to talk about music.
Yeah.
But if you look back, I mean, all those great, Beethoven's, Mozart's, all of them, they were all sponsored by the wealthy to create great things of standing and legacy.
Because philanthropy in the arts is the reason why we have culture. Because I think we reached the peak of philanthropy in the arts, where great sculptors, great architects, great musicians have had their
Michelangelo.
time, and then we've tailed off now because I think to some extent I've had a love-hate relationship with postmodernist architecture my whole life. I loved it because when I was a kid, it was progressive, and I thought, wow, look at that thing, because I grew up in old houses. And then I learned to love traditional architecture, and I love historic architecture. I do lots of historical architectural reference work in the UK, for instance. But I love now that true postmodernist is now classical architecture, and the postmodernist is just an international style of beige that is enforced upon us across the world because it is because it's cheap. And I'm going to use my old catchphrase, because the accountants make all the decisions for the artist.
So we don't have an episode with that.
That's right. But I do love accountants.
I agree with that in general, but I had another educational experience. So I think there's a few epiphanies. One was in high school when my first design teacher taught me Underdale, which was an amazing opportunity experience. Clipsal, where although it was a soulless environment from a design perspective, it gave me the education
and discipline.
Yeah, that too. But mainly the education and understanding of what toolmakers do. And a profound respect for what skill was involved. I mean, I design something and I draw it, and then they go away and they carve it out of with perfection out of hardened steel, so that we can make 1 million of them, and they're all exactly the same as each other. It works every time, every single time. So a profound respect for that. But I also went to Japan. So I worked with Kenji Ekuin at GK Design in Hiroshima and Tokyo. And 22 weeks I spent in Japan.
What is he? Is he renowned for designing anything in particular?
He did the Ikuman soy sauce bottle.
Okay, so we were talking about him with Brandon. We were talking about Brandon a few weeks back.
And the other Japanese, the great industrial designer from Japan, was the man who did the tactile flooring with the raised dots that you see at the top of escalators.
I'm not sure of that one. Yeah. But Kenji also, he worked for Yamaha. And I when I was there, I was working on a dentist chair, which was an amazing opportunity. So you go from this what looked like a torture device to this elegant chaise lounge that you could sit on and
so an elegant torture device.
Yeah, it was good. It was amazing.
I must admit, I absolutely love Japanese design. Yeah. And what is it about it that makes it so good?
I think that there's a few things that happen in Japan. I think it's part of Japanese culture and Japanese thinking. I'm not sure how many 100 years Japan was closed, but Japan was part of China. Mm-hmm. They separated themselves off and isolated themselves from the rest of the world.
Did not know that.
So they basically closed the doors to the rest of the world. And they, instead of going into a recession and decline, they went into a refinement.
What era was this?
what year was this?
Yes.
This was in 14.
Oh, okay.
to 17.
Okay. So we're leading up to MacArthur's introduction to them in the 1700s.
Yeah. So 1700s with the black ships went in, but up to that they were closed, completely closed. Yeah. There was no connection, and they had the samurai rule, and these guys would they would spend a lifetime making a sword. Well, not quite, but
pretty much.
That's what they did, and they would perfect the carving so that they're just doing one shaving, and it was amazing. Ikebana flower arranging. Now, Ikebana is a male's job, so you go in and you arrange flowers in the most appropriate way. Now it's transitioned, but it used to be a very male-dominated society, and the armor, the swords, the very, very very martial environment. That was how they ran, but very simple and very elegant. So they pared it down to the bare minimum in every single case. You pick up a whisk for making tea, and you've got this exquisite bowl which is handmade, and it's still got the fingerprints of the person that made it in there. And a whisk which is made from a single piece of bamboo and sliced so that it's just the right consistency to get the froth in the tea, and the whole sense of ceremony around that. It was totally inspiring, and enlightening.
And they become living objects too, don't they? Those bowls, like that, you have to keep using them, otherwise they break. So they have a life of their own.
They need to be tempered with pouring tea over it. Right. Heat the pot up, and then pour tea over it until it is tempered to the right sound. When you tap it, it then has the right resonance, so that then it's ready to make the tea.
Incredible. I've been obsessed by watching. You just mentioned armor. I've just been watching Adam Savage, and he's been doing the whole tour of the Met. I don't know if you've seen that, and they've got it's incredible. They've got the largest collection in the world of tools for making.
I have seen that.
It's incredible.
Amazing. So, I didn't know I was into armor, but
I studied. I practiced IATA, which is the art of Japanese slow sword drawing.
Right.
For about 7 years in the early 80s.
As you do.
And because I was obsessed with Japanese martial skills, and I was obsessed with Japanese history. And so I did, for my 1986 graduation year, my matriculation year, design study on the art of the Japanese sword. Mm-hmm. And I made this dreadful video documentary with VHS. It was all spliced together. It looked like a terrible episode of Samurai. And it was fantastic. I loved every minute of doing it, but I looked back a year later and thought, how embarrassment. But the whole art of making the Japanese sword, the sword, the katana is incredible. 1,100 laminations of a piece of steel. 1,100. And then the hand polishing of the blade. Mm-hmm. That is...
But I think what's even more interesting about that is they use a magnet to collect the iron from the river sand to make the steel.
Wow.
Which I never knew. So they create the steel once a year.
Yeah.
And they have a magnet which they run through the river.
The riverbeds, yeah.
And that so they concentrate the iron into this mix, and then from that they create the iron, which they then turn into steel. And they were making steel long before anyone was making steel in England in Sheffield Steel. So. Yeah.
They're adding the right amount of carbon to it, so they get that hot, very, very light lamination. And using, as they're forging and heating and tempering it, they're using an ash and carbon mix over it as heating and cooling it to get the right temper on the edge and the right ductility on the back, so that it's.
But it was not only that; it was the fact that they use such fine grains of iron that they were already exposed to the carbon in the first instance. So. That's which you can't get
by getting it out of a roll, milling it down, getting the larger elements,
and they're exposed for hundreds of thousands of years to.
Where did they get the magnet from?
magnetite, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, the magnets have been around for a long time.
Yes, well, the Norse were making a compass. The Norse, when in around about 300-400 AD, were making compasses. They actually this magical thing which gave them a direction to north to travel from the Norse countries to England, so they could pillage, rape, and plunder. I'm sorry, my ancestors did all that, but that's
careful. I think he's got Viking in it.
I got Viking.
He's got the Viking finger.
You do. I got the Viking.
That's his great grandfather.
Actually, my great-great-great-grandfather, the same. We're probably the same village.
My theory is that the Vikings, the Jupiterines was caused. The Vikings could hang on to their axe a little bit longer.
Yes, right. Yes, right to the very because of the haunch on the back. Because the little finger was actually the thing that did all the work to hang on to it.
Nobody could get out of the hands. So hack them all to get a little bit longer.
Or that last 5 pounds at the pub.
I think the theme that's going through this though is, industrial design done well is a hands-on sport.
Oh, no, without doubt, and
that's been lost.
But also a product of the environment which guides it, because from the river, holding onto the axe, making a magnet, here's all the practical applications that guide the industrial designer to realise we're going to do this. Now, what's the practical application?
And if you want to take the katana, for example, you've got the sword, you've got the device for hacking people apart, but it's so refined.
It's very
elegant.
It's a piece of elegant killing equipment, but it's an amazing piece of. It looks so good, but what causes people to want to do that? That's the hard thing to understand.
Well, it's a requirement of the environment that you're living in, and at that time, Japan was being invaded constantly. The Koreans were constantly invading. Everyone was trying to get a bit of Japan, and so the practical reality is if we did not fight, we did not survive. England did the same thing. Well, Britain did the same thing. It was a small continent that was being constantly invaded from the continent. If you look at Greece, we're having the same problems when during the Peloponnesian Wars, when Xerxes was coming over and trying to conquer everything. So you've got a little island environment which is isolated, which is trying to protect itself. How do we protect ourselves? So martial skills and martial talents are going to dominate to a large extent, and they're going to guide cultural evolution.
And that's where people like Leonardo start coming into the. But I think one of the things that I for years I believed Leonardo was the most amazing inventor and designer. Yeah, but I read something which disillusioned me on that a little bit about the 1422 ships from China. So in 1422, there was a great fleet that left China, and on board it had a couple of copies of the Chinese encyclopedia, and the Chinese encyclopedia has all sorts of mechanisms in it. There's a copy of it in the British Museum, and Leonardo got hold of a copy of it. And the thing that Leonardo was able to do that the Chinese didn't do is Leonardo was able to understand perspective. Mm-hmm. So going back to what your point was earlier, we have great ideas, but we can't communicate them very well. Leonardo took all of those a number of those great ideas from that encyclopedia, from very simple drawings that were difficult to understand, put them into a format which communicated in perspective and made models of these concepts. So he was an incredible visualizer. Yeah. I'm not saying he wasn't a genius. I'm just saying he
Do you have an example of one of the ones he stole, or
there were. I wouldn't
not stole, but you know what I mean.
Stealing is probably not quite. Well, the right word.
I mean, we all steal. You know what I mean? Like, or influenced. It's strongly influenced.
You're simply the person in the chain of evolution. Of
I think so.
That's all we are, because everything is a product of the previous iteration.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's anything in particular. It's just the nuances of the fact that prior to Leonardo, there was great illustration and there was great painting, but then the the Chinese fleet came through, and suddenly Leonardo's come up with all these amazing ideas of how to create weapons and things that have
like his armored tortoiseshell with the 4 horses inside the carriage.
That's right.
Is basically his tank.
Yep.
And
the flying machines and the machine gun firing ballista and things.
the multi-firing ballista.
Those things are all absolutely amazing. But again, we come back to the martial reality, is that the money is in the martial. So it's either football or martial law. I mean,
we're seeing it today, right?
Yeah.
Like the world's bombing up again.
Absolutely.
Sadly.
Well, the F-47 fighter,
Yeah.
which has just been released and approved by Boeing, have just been awarded the contract to build the F-47, which is an evolution of the, well, if you look at the F-16 Tomcat, the F-A-18 Hornet, and the F-35, which is, I think, falling out of the sky at the moment. A little bit like the F-111 or the Mirage. In the 70s, if you wanted a Mirage, you bought 500 acres out in the outback, and eventually one would crash land in your property. So the F-47, hopefully that's the new age machine. But I think that the evolution of design, especially in the martial context, is that you win the war, you capture the machinery of war of your opponents. You see what has worked. You improve on it. And war and competition.
I was going to say, because you could even say Cold War. I mean, you look at the space race.
Yeah, but I think if we take out war, we take out the violence. At the end of the day, war is a competition with violence, with death as a result. But if we take out competition, creates generates the demand, which creates innovation.
It creates huge medical advances.
Yeah.
Death and destruction creates medical advances.
Yeah.
You look at what the Nazis did with their machine tools. So they went into Argentina and found carbide. So tungsten carbide was not used until the Germans introduced it into their manufacturing techniques. They wanted to introduce it into their manufacturing because they wanted to work with harder steels. They work with harder steels. Yeah. They don't have to harden them. And part of the processing of working with high temperature, high speed tungsten is that you get better finished parts at the end without having to heat treat them.
Yeah.
England was still working with high speed steel, slow, have to heat treat it afterwards, have to be really careful. Germans were actually running high speed steel, high speed machines with carbide, running high quality steel and making much better quality munitions and weapons, and quickly.
And their MG42 machine gun, general purpose machine gun they used during World War II, and the Schmeiser 9mm that they used during World War II are very good examples of that. The MG42 machine gun actually went on to inspire and became the standard which led to many general purpose machine guns that we're still using today. And
you sounded like a train spotter.
And Chewbacca's not his crossbow, but those machine guns from World War II actually were turned into props for the Star Wars series.
There we go.
And Han Solo's gun was a Mauser, broom-handled Mauser from the First World War.
Hilarious.
So I'm moving on because I know I'm turning into an anorak.
Well,
now.
they only just sold for, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands.
I know, it's crazy
in the prop store.
So we're talking about all of this stuff that's happening. Where would we be then if it weren't? What era would we now be in if it weren't for the major conflicts, military conflicts of the past 5 years?
You'd have to be behind where we are now.
So let's remove World War II, World War One, and let's possibly remove the Boer War, which is more about an evolution from fighting in squares to fighting in trenches. So if we take out those major conflicts, I reckon it would still be about 1910.
Possibly.
I think we would be 1890, about 1910.
There's something that there's two things I don't work on: cars and weapons.
Yep.
I just my ethics, I can't work on them. But there's something that I think is always quite interesting, and that is the axe. So the hand axe, which was a stone, which had one end sharp and the other end rounded so that you could cut
maximize
Your
your
effort.
torque effort onto a thing.
And torque,
Yep.
in estimates, 50,000 years from the hand axe to the axe with a handle on it. So for many, many generations, young sons were there putting a handle on and saying, "Look at this, Dad," and they're saying, don't do that. This has been good enough for so many years. And eventually somebody succeeded in keeping the handle on the axe.
Yeah.
50,000 years. So then
We only just got wheels on suitcases.
but you look at it from another perspective. What did the Wright brothers fly their plane?
Say again, sorry, I missed
The
that.
Wright brothers.
Yeah.
When did they fly?
1909.
1908.
I was in the Air Force. I should have known that one.
I'm disappointed that you didn't jump in there.
But then we landed on the moon in 1968.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
So you go 50,000 years to put a stick on a stone.
Yeah, exponential growth.
And then and that's what's happening now. It happens every single day, every single week.
So when did we start to define the difference between the maker and the designer? When did that start?
I think my feeling on that is there was a transition. So there was a transition between the draftsman and the pattern maker in the foundry. So the pattern maker used to interpret the drawings, and I think they used to add a lot of artistic flourish onto the designs that they were working on. So they were the ones that were making it smooth and making it streamlined or adding some pattern to it. They would do a lot of work in the foundries. So we did a lot of work in foundries. The castings are absolutely amazing. You look at the Singer sewing machines. You look at those. They're absolutely amazing pieces of industrial art. Unfortunately, we learnt how to weld, like cheap
And then
electric welding, and then everything became fabricated.
And then sheet metal fabric, and then sheet metal assembly.
And it became cheap and nasty and square and boxy. But then you look back into the 50s, and Lowry. You look at Raymond Lowry, what he was doing with the streamlining. You look at I'm just trying to think of.
It's my favourite era, by the way. I absolutely love that stuff.
The ergonomics guy. Sorry, just slipped my mind. He designed the man in the brown suit. He did
with his time and motion studies, and then going
the
ergonomics.
But he actually was somebody who brought industrial design into the military, and I don't think of his name. Sorry,
that's all right.
Suddenly,
at 3 a.m, it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Give us a call.
Right. Yeah. So he did human studies and understand ergonomics. Created all the charts. Dreyfus.
Henry starts with a D. I'm going.
Henry Dreyfus. So Henry Dreyfus. He worked as a prop designer, an artist, and then worked for Kodak. And he
invented the fly squad.
He invented the styled fly swat. Yeah.
That's right. It was a guy that walked into his shop and he just went, "There you go."
I think the story is a bit different to that, but the one I heard, there was on a train or an aeroplane, and he drew 2 or 3 drawings, and then several months later, a check came in the mail.
That's right.
Wouldn't you imagine? Can you imagine? Someone actually paying you for your idea?
Today, it would 2 or 3 months later, it would be we're summoning you to court.
Yeah, cease and desist.
Because we're waiting.
Sadly. But anyway, sorry, go on, Andrew.
So, but Dreyfus, he was one of the few people actually understood what design was about, and that was about making things
for people.
For people, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, like he went into great depth, didn't he? Like in measurements of hands, heads,
making soldiers' helmets that fit them rather than making soldiers fit their helmets. That all of those sorts of things. So, but that was in 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Sorry, no,
40s.
40s and 50s rather. That I don't know that I've seen that happening since. I mean, we can talk about Apple, but I'd rather not. I mean,
Yeah. But we do lean on the greats like that. You know, like you would still use that stuff today for ergonomics. You know, that everything that he did back
the
then.
measure of man.
Yeah, exactly. It still
And
stands.
woman.
Yeah, it still stands today.
But that was the time when I think World War One, the Great War showed the world that the Victorian era domination of society, where we're going to achieve this and we need these machines and we'll just find bodies to fit and do that and achieve that. What came out of that was that women understood that they had a role, that they could do more because they had to do more. And so that changed a lot of things. It changed. People started to realize that they could be educated. So the common people started to learn to read and write more so and move into greater roles.
But I think something else came out of that, which is not acknowledged, and that is women learnt skills and men learnt skills that they'd never had an opportunity to learn before.
Yes. Well, everyone learns. Yeah.
So men, they learn how to fight, but they also learn how to repair and maintain machinery because their lives depended on it.
Yeah.
You know, in the past, the machine would break or it would just rot. Women learnt how to operate machine tools and how to manufacture things and what was involved
Planes, make tanks.
Yeah.
They made everything.
make everything.
And that manifests itself in the biggest capacity during World War II because of the shortage.
But then what came out of that afterwards is that all of those people, yes, they learnt about killing, which is horrid, but they also learnt how to be self-sufficient.
Well, I think killing was the product of what they did. I think they learned how to do things, and killing was the product as opposed to learning to kill. And I stress that because of my interest in the human condition and what my grandfather, all of our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers had to do. So it's rather than learning to kill, they learned how to do things that made them become more practically orientated and to maintain the products of their craft that they were forced to endure.
And this is where companies like, and I'm bringing it back to industrial design again now. And companies like Stanley came from. So So Stanley came from the returned soldier who knew how to do things and couldn't afford to have someone build a house for him. So he needed the tools and the equipment to make and build his house. So Stanley started making planes, not just for the craftsmen. They mass-produced millions of hand planes and chisels and these screwdrivers and these planes like a
We'll just define for listeners, planes is not as a flying one, as one
No,
cutting some
yes.
So
Stanley number 2.
No. I'm talking about an adjustable plane with a routing plane that has a number of blades that you put in it.
Yes.
So you can turn a piece of wood into a window.
Yes.
Yeah.
All that you need is a bit of time and some skill. And before that was made,
they're all timber blocks.
There were timber blocks,
yeah,
but
with
they were made in
slide and
they were made in a workshop, in a sweatshop where tradesmen would just sit there planing all day, and that's all they did. They would plane one shape onto a piece of wood, and then that would get turned into a window. Now, what happened?
Did Stanley then invent the cast steel body?
That was a transition. So it started off with a wood. And then they made the frog, which holds the blade, which was attached to a wooden base, and then they transitioned through that, and it all becomes part of technology. So as advancements,
but Stanley made the first cast steel base plane,
cast iron,
right.
Japanese have been doing it to the nth degree forever, but
but they pulled it and we pushed it. So so quite different, apparently. But I love tools. I mean, that's evident in...
You should get that on your T-shirt.
Yeah.
If you've been to his workshop, it's very evident. He has every measuring device known to man.
As long as we qualify the fact that tools include the following and exclude the following.
Yeah. I apologise to my wife. I love tools.
Well, I think I have a similar disease. But
No, his disease is it's I think it's further.
my workshop's more like a Bunnings where a bomb's gone off.
Yeah.
No, it's far more organised.
Yeah. Can we go back to? I want to get on to people understanding how it's evolved. So industrial design from 1985 at Clipsal to now.
To how ARID's evolved.
Yeah, not ARID, but industrial design. How has it changed? What are some of the key things that you've seen come into the industry that's kind of?
I'm going to ask for a bio break first.
Absolutely. We're going to take it to it. Thank you.
Yes.
We were talking about how the industry's changed, basically. So, what are the major differences that you've seen? How the approach to industrial design has changed, say, from the 80s to now?
Well, obviously, technology has made huge inroads into. At Shell and Clipsal, we were working on drawing boards with pen and ink and vellum, basically, sending drawings, doing wet blueprints and taking them down to the tool room. When I look at that now, we'd have a designer, a draftsman. At Clipsal, at Shell, I had a tracer.
A tracer as well, yeah.
So I do the drawings, work everything out, do the drawing, then a tracer would trace over it, and that would go on. At Clipsal, we had to do our own tracing with pen and ink. No colours. Go down to the tool room and see real tools being made, with the smell of the cutting fluid and the filing and the grinding and all of that. I was very privileged, I think, to have gone through all of that, learning the manual skills, and then also learning at the very beginning the CAD skills. So going through something like CADsman, which was a South Australian company which developed its own CAD software. They were bought up by another company. I can't remember who now. Worked with some programs called Personal Designer, which was a 2.5D, 3D CAD package in 1985, 86.
Wow.
Bought my first computer in... Oh, well, I should say I left Clipsal and started my own company. So 24 years old,
This is 88?
Yeah, so I just resigned.
From your own company?
No, from Clipsal.
Oh.
I resigned from Clipsal and said I'm going to start a design company. And the guys there said, "Oh, well, you bought into a company." I said, "What? Can you do that?" No. I just bought a drawing machine, had a few compass, and what else do you need?
Some French curves.
Yeah, off you go. Yeah, all good. And some Pantone markers. We had got a small half office in Green Hill Road.
Just yourself, or did you have an employee?
No, there was a group of graphic designers.
Okay.
I was shared a room with an illustrator, with Sally Heinrich. So she shared her studio space with me for a little while, which was very kind to do that. And then I realised very soon after that I needed my tools. I couldn't work in an office. I needed to make stuff.
You needed a workshop that happened to have a desk in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So then I moved into Parkside, and I found this amazing place, which had a bluestone cottage, and out the back there was this garage which had been converted into a studio, and it was like, that's my workshop. Perfect. So the first thing after moving in and paying the bond, I ripped all the carpet up and bought a milling machine and a lathe and put them
into your house,
into this rented property. And every time.
So which room gets the mill? Is it the bedroom two?
No.
Or is it out the back in the studio?
This was out back in the studio.
Oh, okay.
So, and every time that they come for an inspection, I was, "Oh yeah, that's that. Don't need to have a look in there." So they wouldn't, and this went on for 3 or 4 years. They never actually went in there.
Brilliant.
And then when I pulled everything out, there was there was this spatter of oil vertically where the lathe was and horizontally where the milling machine was. So it was this,
Perfect.
it was great. So I can't remember things I designed and made there, but there were a lot of things. But I think one of the things that was my first real learning curve was how naive I was about business. Nobody taught us in high school about tax. Nobody taught us in design school about ruthless businessmen and or business people, mainly businessmen at that stage. But I would do a design, and it would be 6 months before I'd get paid, because they don't pay until it's been made. It's just like,
right.
whoa,
No cash flow.
no cash flow. And then that's why I was fully in the belief that the design wasn't finished until it was manufactured. Which makes a lot of sense. So, but then what I would do is I'd do the design and I'd present the design to somebody, and they'd look at it and say, "What do we do with it now?" So then I'd have to go and find a tool maker. And then, the toolmaker would make 10 times as much money as I made on it. And then we'd have to find a molder, and then they'd make 100 times as much money as I made out of it. So I started to learn that not only was that they were making more money out of it than I was, they were making more money out of it because I had designed it better than they could design it themselves in the first instance. So they could charge more. So the toolmakers could charge more, the manufacturers could charge more, and the people that were selling the product could charge more.
How old were you when this was occurring?
25, 26.
Okay.
But that's the power of design, right?
That's the power of design. And I believed it, but I didn't know how to harness it. And that's when I started to slowly become more empowered with the toolmakers. So I would work with certain toolmakers. I'd work with the toolmakers that would give me a commission for getting the tooling for them. So I'd always get the best price, but I would also get a commission as well.
So for those who are listening to the show and who are they're thinking about how they're going to be in this industry and how they're going to commercialize it.
Don't.
For the two in the state who are actually thinking that they will, it's not just about design, it's about the commercial reality and how you're actually going to commercialize, because I think we've all had the issue where we have drawn a picture and created a process and defined how a thing is going to be made, which reduces the onus, reduces the effort of the manufacturer and makes it easier for the salesperson. So they all make more. So the intellect that goes into design you've got to make sure you put 10% into commercialization, 10% into understanding how you're actually going to make money on it, which is any creative endeavor. People who draw pictures, people who make things, design things, create things are not necessarily.
That's the unique thing about an industrial designer.
It's the eternal conundrum.
It bridges between art and a financial reality.
You also have the conflict because everybody tells you that it's easy.
I could have done that if you give. I could have done that myself in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yet now that you've done it for me.
Yeah, exactly right.
Especially the easier it works and the simpler it
That's
looks.
right. Why why am I paying so much for something so simple? You're paying so much because it is simple.
Yeah. Correct.
If I designed something that was far more complex and far more difficult and far more expensive, you wouldn't want me to do it. That's not logical. So. And that's when I came to the realization that some people are smarter than others, and I felt that I was really the dumb one because I was letting them take advantage of me.
In the commercial sense,
In the commercial sense,
and you've proven them wrong since then.
So, and I had a lot of people telling me I'd never succeed, which of course,
anyone who tries anything different gets that.
Yeah, and of course. If you do get that, that means that you're going to be more and more stubborn and eat more.
Not everyone. I mean, a lot of people cave at that point. It takes a certain person.
So
dig your heels in.
I dug my heels in, and I've
I think that would be the running theme of people that we have on our show. They're the type of people that dig their heels in.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, tell us some of the topics are people who saw the mountain of adversity before them and thought, to hell with that. There's a mountain there. I'm going to climb it. I don't care what people say.
Yeah.
And that's why Andrew's here tonight, because he did exactly that.
Exactly.
In an industry that we both are passionate about, and that a lot of people listening to our show are passionate about, and you've done it. So we want to know your secret.
I think the biggest secret is to be stubborn.
Yeah,
but not stubborn,
not obstinately stubborn,
not
intelligently stubborn,
but also have a certain level of pride. Well, have a big level of pride, large level of pride in what you do.
Yeah.
Do it very, very well, do it to the best of your ability, and push yourself, constantly push yourself. And every day I learn something new, and I love that I learn something new. I push myself with the technology, but I also go back to the old ways of doing it. And I think it's learning something new is really important. Every single day, if you learn something new, you're going to succeed. And today I learned something that from a business perspective, that I hadn't seen before. And the day before I learned something about, how my 3D printer did something. And the day before that I learned how something else worked. And each day those experiences add up so that you can look at something and the answer is obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everybody else.
Can I just interject there? And we're talking about learning. We're talking about, and earlier you talked about inspiration, and you talked about your design teacher in high school, Hugo Silva. In high school, I had two teachers who were greatly affected and directed my life in that transition I had from design to thinking I'm not going to make it, so I did another thing and I worked for a government and in an unrelated industry, and then I came back to design. So my design teacher, Michael Badnock, was inspiration. He was incredibly inspirational, and he inspired just from one little hand sketch when he and I were talking about cars and great cars, and he thought, this is what a great car is. And he hand sketched, with 5 or 6 lines, a very simple outline of a 1920s style Tourer, 2-seater Tourer. That has affected me so much that I'm now building something in a retrospectively styled roadster now, and Lee's helping with the supercharger design. Then there was my industrial design teacher, Peter Ziersch, who taught woodwork, metalwork and plastics, and I was quite inspired by the way that he taught and the way that he did things. Lee, what I want to ask you now, the people that inspired you in school. So we're talking about high school. We're not talking about university or anything, whether it's design. Who were your inspirational? Who were the inspirational teachers? Did you have them? Or did you think?
Hands-on stuff, it was Dad. Because Dad was a fitter and turner, and I had free reign at the shed, like from day dot.
Yes.
I've said this before, but I've got a picture of me with a power drill at age 3.
Yeah,
and I could,
with a hole in your leg.
Yeah, pretty much. And it was like a giant 3-phase lathe. I had no idea how to use, but it was there. You go.
You had a lathe. You had a lathe.
I said, go use it.
God's sake,
I got my first car.
Dream of having a lathe.
Exactly.
Still dream.
I got my first car when I was 14. And I had to rebuild it.
Yeah.
So it was. I guess it was that. And once you've got an aptitude for something that you feel like that you're good at something, it gives you an amazing amount of confidence. So I remember when I hit high school, it was like tech study was awesome. I remember my tech study teachers coming up to me at lunchtime, disappointed because I had over, the tolerance on the hose thing that I'd turned on the lathe.
Mm-hmm.
He came up to me, like, it was, I was out by a few thou. It was just like, everyone was just laughing.
That's crazy.
At me. But, it was like he knew that I cared enough about it.
And then he came to you. So 1985 and 86, in 86 when I was doing matriculation, my design teacher, Michael Badnock, had a beautiful single-masted sloop. It was a 1920s clinker-built semi-open deck yacht up at Galway. And I'm sure the statute of limitations has exceeded its limitations. So when we're getting toward the quiet time just before exams in Year 12, he asked myself and one of the other boys, he invited Stephen and I to go along and become cadet rescue boat drivers for the yacht club. And then every now and then you say, look, do you fancy coming up and working on the boat? So we go up for half a day in school time, work on his boat. He would show us how to cut out the rotten timber and skive in new timber and then seal it up and cork. And then he'd buy us beer and pizza for lunch. That was the greatest, most liberating and inspiring thing that happened to me in high school. That trust and the fact that he treated me in such a way, my design teacher, who I had an immense amount of respect for.
Yeah.
If that happened today, he would be sent to prison. I'd go into psychological counselling, some sort of therapy.
Yeah.
So we've lost a lot of what has
people are
we had in the 80s.
Yeah, I think there's I went back to, as you know, I was a musician, and I didn't even know what an industrial designer was till I was 30. So I had a career change, you know, and I knew I liked making stuff. I didn't know what making stuff was called officially. So I went through uni when I was 40 and as an industrial designer, and I saw that the vast majority of the younger people were scared to get hands-on and to make mistakes. And then I'd have a lot of conversations with the lecturers around that. You know, the hardest thing was for them to get them motivated to just get in and just make something.
Yeah.
To make something. And I think where Andrew has a strong advantage is, you know, he grew up in that era where it was encouraged, you know, to make things. And a lot of the time, like the technical tools that we have now are incredible. You know, like I've got an entire, you know, drafting suite, you know, tracer, everything on my computer.
Yeah.
You know, and at the press of a button, I can have a complete technical drawing. And then I can press go on.
You have much more than that. And that's what I was leading to before. Yeah. You have a full 3D CAD model that you can instantly flick to the other side of the world, and they could make it. They can make it
in a second, exactly. Or I could press go in 15 minutes.
And I'm doing the same thing.
I've got one in my hand.
Buildings and interiors for projects in Europe, and so
I think it inhibits
transfer that stuff.
Yeah, but I think it inhibits that because it's like drawing with pen and paper. It's that thing where the hand went that way and went, oh, that's interesting, and you follow that thread, you know. Or if you're out in the shed and you're cutting something, you accidentally cut something one way, and then it becomes something else.
Or you feel the thing that you drew, and you think, no, that doesn't feel right. So then you change, or you carve a bit of clay or a bit of wood, or I will go down to the milling machine. Yeah, admittedly it's a CNC milling machine. I'll draw something on the computer, cut something on the mill, and then look at it and think, what was I thinking? And then then stop, you know, halfway through the program, and then put something else on there.
Or the scale is massively out.
But it's the momentary inspiration. It's the inspiration of the moment which is lost with modern technology, because the inspiration of the moment when you're on the tool, or you're feeling, as you say, let's say you're carving a bow stave, and the piece of yew, the heartwood and the outer wood, all of a sudden you feel the heartwood is actually too hard, and so you adjust your cut. Mm-hmm. If you're milling that, the milling machine's not going to feel that.
No, absolutely not. And the other thing is, you need a faster machine, as in a faster CAD machine, because you're thinking when you're drawing a line, you're thinking of the line, and your brain is doing all these things. With the computer, you've already thought it, and you're 3 steps ahead, while the computer is still trying to catch up with you. Because
that's ideal. But what's the practical reality for 9 out of 10 people, though, in your industry?
Sorry, I don't understand.
I don't understand the question either.
No.
So I'm drawing a picture and explaining it to a client and I've missed the point. So please finish your point and then I'll come back to it.
Okay, so I draw a picture, I draw a line, I know where that line's gone, and I can adjust it. And I'm engaged in that line while I'm drawing it, or I'm cutting a piece of foam, or I'm carving a piece of clay, or I'm doing something on the mill, and all of those things where my body and my mind, my eyes, everything is involved in that process. When I'm in the computer, I'm fully immersed in three-dimensional space. In one hand, I've got my 3D mouse, which is holding and manipulating the object in 3D space. In the other hand, I've got the mouse, and I'm thinking in three-dimensional geometry. I want to draw a line from here to here because I want to change this shape. Now, I already pictured that in my head, and as far as I'm concerned, it's done. But the rest of my body and the computer are lagging behind me on that. So it might only be a second, but it's not the same as me taking 3 minutes to carve a piece of wood, because it's a fraction of a second, and my brain has then decided I'm bored with that because I'm not completely involved, and I've gone on to think about something else. And that's where that interface is missing with the computer. It's and I think the younger generations haven't had that that tactile, emotional taste, smell, sound, everything that goes together in creating that. You know, you're carving a piece of jelly tongue and you can hear the blade cutting through it, and you can feel that, you know, as you progress through there, you've got the shape the way that you want it, and then oops, I've gone too far. You know, that isn't there with the computer.
Case in point, some years ago, I met a chap who started working for a restoration business. He was a machinist. Was a tool maker, and he went to work for a notable university in the city for an engineering department. His role was to do any of the machining, mill and lathing work for the engineering students, because the engineering students were not considered to be mature enough to operate mill or lathe at a university level. And so if they wanted anything done, he had to do all of their milling work. And so instead of
teaching them
20 or 30 university engineering students in a workshop learning hands-on how to use machinery that
teach them how to fish.
we all learned in the 80s, 70s and 80s. Well, one of us in the 90s.
Kindergarten.
And on to use machinery, university students weren't allowed to do it. And so work that they should have been pumping out on a daily basis was now taking, I need this person to do this, can I book this in? And it wasn't going to be done for about 3 months. So I'm just concerned
There's a lag. So you've had a creative inspiration, and then the time from when you've had that creation to when you have the object in your hand,
the realization
is disconnected. And that's one of the other issues with even with 3D printing. You draw something and you come back the next day, it's on your desk. That's wonderful. I would never say that.
It's very empowering. I love it. It's like magic some days.
It is, but there is a disconnect, and it's fine for a mechanical object that it doesn't. You have to do it, but when there's a particular curve or a shape or something that you want to do, it's so much better to be actually in there carving it. And
I remember you and I worked on a project a few years ago, and like it was. I didn't have a 3D printer at the time, and you'd made me a 3D print. And then we took to it with a saw. Yeah. You know, and it was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And, you know, so now, you know, like you say, there is that disconnect. So I'll destroy most of the 3D prints that I do these days. as I work through. Well, not destroy, but I don't see them as precious items.
But did you see, before we cut that one up with the saw, how did you see them?
Well, you couldn't see all the way through it.
Yeah.
You couldn't visualize the issues that were within.
Right. So but if you'd spent several $100s on a 3D print, would you take to it with a bandsaw?
I would have thought twice with several hundreds, exactly.
Yeah.
But now that they're cents, and I can print one overnight, and I go to sleep.
If you'd been making it yourself by hand, you would already know what was inside,
and you were going to make a mistake with it anyway. Yeah, exactly.
So if you were hand making it, you would know you know what's going on.
So hand making, you're going to sacrifice your 7 hours of hand making, or you're going to sacrifice your 3.5 hours and $400 of your 3D printer.
But it just comes back to that point of it's okay to make mistakes, because that's where the nuggets of gold are.
We've got some big questions we still need to get through for the show. What I'd like to do now,
I want to see.
Andrew, you've bought some things along. We love show and tell. I'm going to pull the cheese platter out of the way.
The game board.
The game board. No, actually, I'm going to push it closer to you.
No, don't do that, because he needs to play with his toys.
Let's see what you've got. Tell us what you've got, and tell us about the business. No, I'm going to push that in front of you because you need feeding up.
Okay, thank you.
You're losing weight or something?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, you must be down to about 110 kilos.
So I know we've got a few items here. We're going to start with the. Are we going to start with the taller one? No, we're going to start with the G dot. Okay. Crunch, crunch.
We'll start with this one.
Okay.
And because we're talking about 3D printing, I'm starting with this one.
Yep.
This is a fly trap. So EnviroSafe contacted me out of the blue. I got a phone call, which doesn't happen very often, asking me if I wanted to design a fly trap. And I said, that sounds like absolutely great idea.
Marcus, have we got that in shot?
Yeah.
Great.
The fly trap originally that they made was basically an oversized jam jar with a lid on top. And if you go into LinkedIn, I think it's still up there, you can see these horrendous thing with these dead fly bodies in it that
wonderful
stinks and buzzes.
Sounds like my school bag in high school.
Yeah. So I designed essentially this product at that point. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is going to look good. It's going to work well. Absolutely fantastic. 3D printed it, sent it off to the client, and put some resin on the inside so that it was waterproof, and thought everything was going to be great. The problem with 3D print is that it's porous. And the way that the fly trap works is through aroma. So the aroma was actually just permeating through the whole thing. So it was attracting lots of flies, but no flies were actually going in. And so everybody thought this was a disaster, and I'm thinking, this isn't right. This doesn't make any sense at all. So after nearly a month of struggling, trying to work out what was going, I wrapped the thing up in sticky tape, just from top to bottom, in tape, like just bound it up like a mummy, and it caught flies. And I thought, okay, so this is.
Had you tried sealing it with other materials?
Yeah, it had already been soaked in epoxy and everything else,
and it was still porous.
So you've already identified the porosity.
Yeah, and worked out how I can possibly solve it, but it didn't work. So then the next thing, I went down to the local IGA and bought half a dozen bottles of Schweppes lemonade, because they just happened to be the shape of the bottle that's inside. So I got this design for the bottle that's inside. So you've got this taper, and you look at the Schweppes lemonade bottles.
Yes, now I'm seeing similarities. That's awesome.
I'd just like to say that Schweppes will be contacting you fairly soon for a sponsorship deal. But
Schweppes would not. I mean, that was just the identification of this is the design, and the whole idea is that the flies come in. There's a screen that goes on the top, and the flies come in and they deposit in here. So this area will become full of flies, and that's why it's tapered that way. And so I got these Schweppes bottles and cut them up with a knife and got hot glue and glued one all together from these Schweppes bottles, which took me all of an hour.
Yeah.
And magically we're catching flies again.
Yeah.
So technology really caused a major drama in this project.
It's kind of like that. We've talked to quite a few people that grew up on farms of late, and it's that same mentality. It's like, rather than reaching for the lightsaber, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've gone and grabbed that bit of 2x4, put some screws in it, and gone, yep, that's right. The gate works now.
But if I hadn't had the experience to understand what was going on, the project was going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole company had, they said, "Oh, well, okay, thanks, we've blown our money." But
How many sleepless nights? Was it the 3 a.m. thing? Well, when was it 3 a.m.? It's always 3 a.m.
It's like between 2 and 3.
So I've written 3 a.m. Right?
You have written
3 a.m.
3 a.m. Between
3 a.m. is the key time.
Between 2 and 3. Yeah, it's just like, and he says like, when's IGA going to open? I got to get down there. And my son.
You mean where does BWS open? Because I've got to go and get another bottle.
Yeah, well, that was going to be later. So my son ended up with lemonade and had a good treat for him with that.
That's excellent. So what else we got? What's the next one?
And then the next one is.
You might have taken that off the table, probably.
Yeah. So this one is this is technology which. It's amazing technology. I'm not going to
for the tech pack.
The tech pack was amazing. Brought forward. It's a Japanese design. It's a sensor that detects UV radiation from fire. So they can detect the fire.
Okay.
With the UV radiation, and it can detect it from 350 meters away. It's used in firefighting equipment, used in plane doors and all sorts of things. So it's a known technology.
UV detection is going to detect it much sooner than the heat detection, because for 350 meters away,
it can see it sees the photons coming from the from the fire source.
Yeah.
So the product was invented by. There's always one of my amazing clients. They are all very inspirational, and they all, they're putting their houses on the line. These guys. So I think that they're amazing. But
that's a good point. There's a real bravery in that, isn't there? It's crazy.
They have no idea of how to do it, but they're going to do it, and they and trust me to try and make it better for them.
Yeah.
So what had happened is he, and I didn't bring the Jiffy box, but usually what happens is the customer will bring to me a standard grey Clipsal box.
Yeah.
With some holes drilled in it. So he had 4 little holes drilled in it and 4 sensors, and each one of these sensors could look out and saw about 15 degrees at every 90 degrees. So there was these huge blind spots.
So if it's actually occurring in Mrs. Smith's front yard,
that's right.
Bad luck.
And if it was down below, it was no good. So I worked out what angle it was looking at, and each one of these sensors is like $30 or $40. And so by understanding the angle that they can see, I threw away one of the sensors, so instantly took 30% of the cost to manufacture out of the product.
Oh, right. So it's 120 degree.
Yeah.
Can you just hold up the camera? So where does that mount? That mounts on a post or
mounts on a post on the top of the house.
Okay, right.
And it looks out. It's called Argus. Argus is the sentry, so the Indian sentry that looks out. Got many, many eyes. And again, I helped them come up with the name for the product because the names that they were coming up with weren't as good.
Like Barry's fire detector wasn't quite as good.
Oh, that was great. Oh, that was so good.
Oh, no idea.
So, you have to be polite.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So, and this thing sits up on top of the roof, looks out, 360, 24/7.
Right. And then what does it do? Does it set off like sprinklers or something?
It looks at fire. If the fire comes in, it sees a bit of fire, it turns the sprinkler on.
So it's a detection and trigger device.
Yeah, and it turns the sprinkler on for a few minutes and then turns it off again and turns it on again until...
Why aren't these mandatory in the hills?
Well, I think one of the reasons it's not mandatory is because the sales machine or mechanism that this company has is not as efficient as it could be.
Okay.
So it needs a senator to get behind it and say you have to have one of these because
it does.
Here's the value.
And
I mean, especially in like Australia. I mean, with the recent fires in California. My goodness.
The first month that this was released, we built 22 of them, and they were put out into the field. In that first month, it saved $2.5 million worth of property.
Right. That's insane.
But it's very, very difficult to even promote that. And I think there's the bit of the tall poppy syndrome of it's designed in South Australia, so we need to look somewhere else first to see if there's a better one out there.
That's interesting because I think we've all, well, certainly I have, and I know Lee has, we have had the issue of we've designed something in a small country town, which is colloquially known as Adelaide, and you take that thing to the big city, and the sophisticated big city people think, well, I think I could find someone else. So
no, I disagree with that. I think what the big cities will accept it from Adelaide much sooner.
So that's what I was going to ask you. How? What is your experience, and how is that actually?
Yeah. So I think I design something in Adelaide, and I go to Sydney, or I go to Tokyo, or I go to Hangzhou, and they're very happy. They think it's great.
Yeah. That's the experience that I've had too.
Like, that's overseas because they don't necessarily disassociate Adelaide
or even interstate.
But when you design something in Adelaide,
loser then.
No, because all your work's overseas.
True.
So, but you design something in Adelaide, and they won't look at it. So, as an example, we designed. I designed a robot with a company, a little educational robot, and we sold more of them in Tasmania than we did in Adelaide, and we sold 100 times as many in California.
This is not intrinsic to desigin, though. Like, no, I can go back to when I was.
This is commercialization.
I went back when I was 20 years old. When I was 20 years old, we went and took the band on tour, and because we were interstate, we got a gig at the pub. I remember every time we landed at the pub, people would come up, obviously been trying to get a gig in their own hometown. Yeah. They go, "Oh, how did you got a gig?" And it's like, well, interstates were obviously better. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I doubt it's any different. We always bag Adelaide for that, but I
think so.
I know I do, but I think it's probably it's a thing around the whole world. If it's made in your own backyard,
yes,
it can't be good.
Right? If Barry the neighbour has invented it, then there's obviously a problem because I went to school with Barry. But if Mr. or Mrs. Smith from a different city invented it, there's a disassociation of the intellectual capacity.
Yeah.
But there's also the other issue. If you're in Adelaide and you design something, you're hiding it. You don't show anyone.
Because we're terrified that someone's going to commercialise it before us.
Yeah, you go to Sydney and look at this, look what I've done. And everybody's showing you things that they've done and they're not protected, and that's but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
How do we overcome that internet? How do we overcome that reticence?
But yeah, I think he makes a really good point. It's only an idea.
Absolutely.
And even if you've designed it, you're only halfway there. It's not until
you're not halfway.
Until you've got the physical product in your hand. You're not.
Yeah. Until you've got it tooled up and you're ready to roll out.
Yeah,
but in the mind of the commercialization chappie somewhere or chapette somewhere who thinks there's a cool idea, here's a boy from the farm who's got this thing, and I'm going to do this.
Where's my fly trap one? You're hitting it. Okay,
there's your Sweps model.
Yeah. So this is the fly trap. I went from a 3D printed prototype, which was a disaster, to a Sweps bottle.
Sorry, I just get talking to
a Sweps bottle, which gunned it. It absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then committed $60,000 US to tooling based on a Sweps bottle.
Yep.
And we made 100 of them. We tested them in Australia. We thought they were pretty good. And then the customer committed to 30,000. Were they an Adelaide company? No.
Yeah. But we don't make things here anymore. There's that mentality, isn't there?
But they didn't make it in Sydney either.
No.
But why did they believe that it could work? Because they looked at what it was. They didn't look at where it came from. They judged the product not
On its merits.
on its merits. Yeah. Not
On where it came from.
not where it came from.
Yeah.
But look at this one. 3 years in, and we've made 50 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Not after this show. You'll be making thousands.
And as a result of we've got to release
please sign,
documentation. If you could just sign this, it's
sure.
we're happy with 1.5%.
Yeah, you can have that. You can have that 1.5% of my 1.5%.
So what's the last one that you brought on?
Okay, the last one is a product that I actually designed 15 years ago. So and 15 years ago, it was designed for a company called MEA, which was Measuring Engineering Australia, and they had an idea that people wanted to know what the soil moisture content was for growing their crops. Mm-hmm. And they had a device called a tensiometer. Tensiometer basically measures the tension or the pressure that's required to pull water out of the soil. Mm-hmm. So you pull the water out of the soil, and what it did, it had a ceramic cylinder, which was a known porosity, and then it had water in it, and the water would be pulled out of the device, and that would then show a pressure on the gauge. Very complicated, very difficult to use. So
did that require a constant vacuum of some sort? Right. Okay.
Absolutely. Right. And then you'd have to top it up with water every now and then. So every couple of months it would dry out. You'd have to pull it out of the ground. You'd have to top it up with water. You have to reconfigure it again. And it was very fiddly. So successful in Europe and used in Europe a lot, but in Australia very difficult to use. So the company in America came up with a product as a gypsum block was the first thing that they were using. And they used gypsum because gypsum swells when it gets wet, and then they put a strain gauge in there, and they can measure the tension. But the problem with the gypsum block is that the gypsum block breaks down. So after about 2 or 3 years, it will break down, and therefore it doesn't work. Yep. So come along another company. They came up with another product which uses a ceramic cylinder and some sand and some other things, and it creates the tensiometer in there. And that was really a good, lovely sensor. What you do is you put the sensors in the ground, you go up to it, and you connect up to it, and you look at a little needle, and the needle would move backwards and forwards, and you get your glasses out and you try and work out how it was to what the soil moisture was like. And the guys at MEA thought, this is crazy. You know, I need to get my bifocals on to read this figure, and I have to get down out of the tractor. I have to go right up to the tomatoes, and this doesn't make sense. So what we've done, and I didn't bring a device to trigger it, but there's a series of flip dots on here. So these flip dots are what's on the front of a bus. So they're designed so that you can see them from 100, 200 meters away. And what happens is that each one of these flip dots is set up so that it displays a level of moisture in the water, in the ground. And the other thing that's really a huge advantage of this product is that it only uses power to flip the dot.
Wow, so it could last forever on a couple of
right.
double A's. Yeah.
So is it a potentiometer, which is
it changes the magnetic polarity of the dot.
Right.
Changes that, and it flips, and it stays there.
Right.
And it will stay there forever. Yeah. Until you give it another pulse. So you can put 2 AA batteries in here. This lasts for 5 years.
Wow.
And what's the accuracy?
Enough,
yeah. It's like we're talking about percentages of soil moisture in there. And the beauty of it is you can put it at the end of the paddock, and you can get your binoculars out, and you can see
Right.
from 300, 400, 500 meters away whether you need to turn the sprinklers on or not. You don't have to get out of the bed. You don't have to dial up the internet. You don't have to do any of these things. Now, 15 years ago, I designed it. We made approximately 1,500 a year for this company every year, moving on. And 3 years ago, the company got sold to a data company, and they were interested in collecting cloud data. This thing doesn't have anything to do with cloud data. So then we didn't make very many of them. So, and I need to point out, I don't know if I mentioned, but ARID has moved from doing design to design and manufacture. So we design and manufacture and deliver finished product to customers.
Yep, ARID being your company.
My company, yeah. So we delivered finished product to the company, to the supplier. And they then got sold to another company, CropX, which is a European company, and they decided to drop the product. So the next thing I noticed is that on their website is GDOT is dead. And
so who owns the IP on that?
Well, ARID does now. So we very quickly made a transition.
I'd like to just update this document that we'd like it.
So we transitioned and bought the trade name, the GDOT, and we had all the intellectual property for the industrial design and the manufacturing. So as of December last year, we are now doing direct to customer sales for the first time.
Congratulations. That's a big step.
35 years.
So you've started out 6 years old. We're going down to the beach. This is not the beach. There's just a big steel thing with rivets. I know it's a little holiday house. We're going to go there for a while. And then you turn up in Australia. And then from there you progress through
to pouring oil over Parkside.
Pouring oil over Parkside and invading the Schweppes and making lights and all sorts of things. And so you've gone from design to design and advice, and then design and manufacturing to now design, manufacturing and retail.
Yeah. So this is my first transition into direct to customer sales.
Yeah, right.
And it's pretty daunting, but we've been making this for 15 years. And so the only part that I have to learn now is how to sell it.
Is it daunting because you put a stack of dough in it, or is it daunting because of the emotional investment?
The emotional, the money's cool. That's a hard one to answer. Money. I know I can earn more money.
Yeah, but
if it fails, there'll be an emotional.
Yeah. You put your heart on the line.
I put a lot on the line, and I believe in the product. We've already sold. I think we've sold enough to cover our costs, even though we haven't made any yet. This doesn't go to air just yet, does it? No. We've got. I've got a company in Spain that wants to buy 100. I've got a company in Africa that wants to buy 100. I've got some strawberry farmers that have bought a few, and I've got various other people that want to take it to trade shows. So, I'm fairly confident that we will recover the money. What I'm not confident of is how successful it will be, but it's another learning experience. It's like being in the tool room. Now I'm in the marketing.
Next step in the journey.
Yeah, I'm in the marketing room. Yeah. So. And I'm doing things very different to how the engineering company I did this for. I have new packaging, I have new instructions, I have a new website, I have all of these things that I know about that I've learned from the experience of working with all of my other customers, people that I've learned to respect and understand. They've put everything on the line and trusted me. I've learned from them and gained from that experience to be able to hopefully make the world a little bit better. In every make a difference and make it better. Is
Actually, this is a really good point. It's a good time to ask. We always ask our guests, how do you define success, and do you think you've reached it?
How do I define this? I think I've got a lot of successful products behind me. I don't think I've finished yet. Well, no, I haven't. I think that what I really would like to know is, well, what I'd like to really believe is that when I finish in this life, that I've made a difference, that there is going to be somebody that's going to notice something that I did and remember that it was Andrew that did it. And if that happens, that'd be great. Whether it's one of my children or probably more importantly a stranger. If a stranger notices that there was something that was done, and as I said, I know that I've done things that are, I can go to a gallery, I can go to a museum, I can go to a government building, and my products aren't on display; they're in common usage in those buildings, and that's better.
Yeah,
that's way better than having it on display and having your name.
Because 47 million people have got one.
And
it's working. It's
working. It's working every single time, and people don't notice.
Yeah, and they're not going to replace it for 35 years.
No, and the young designer that's trying to compete to replace that product in that existing company, he's got a long way to go to catch up with that 30 years of history of that product being there. This year he may sell more of his new product, but he's got 30 years of sales, and next year I wonder if his product is still going to be selling, and if the old product is going to continue. I don't apply that only to the products I've designed, but that applies to a lot of products that exist, like pens and standalone products like watches and pens and utilitarian products like knives. I love. I was talking to a potential customer today about designing a knife and trying to explain to him that it will take weeks and not months to design a knife that is better than something else that's out there. The Opinel knife, for example, is
the most engineered design thing on the planet.
It's just how are we going to improve on that? And he gave me some samples that he'd been working on, and they were just miles away from being even functional.
Ergonomics are an insane thing, to get that feel right.
If I get that project and I work on that project, I'm going to be in the workshop for a long time, carving bits of clay and bits of wood and getting it so that it fits not only my hand but somebody else's hand. I know that I have made a difference because I've worked on equipment that saves people's sight. I've worked on ophthalmic equipment. I've worked on surgical equipment. I've worked on park benches. I've worked on toilet seats. I've worked, there's very few things in the environment of modern day environment that I haven't worked on. Air conditioners, tables, office furniture, park benches. There's
all the things that we take for granted. Yeah. So before we sign off, what's next for Andrew and what's next for ARID?
I want to go sailing.
There we go. We're breaking it down.
Excellent.
I promised myself I was going to buy a boat for myself, and I bought it a couple of years early because COVID came along, and I thought, well, now or never.
Yep.
And I have.
The world's ending. Let's buy a boat.
Why not? What else can you do?
We can sail to the end.
Yeah. So Oracle.
So what is the boat?
The Oracle is my yacht.
Okay.
It's a Bavaria 37, and she resides down at Glenelg. So I have to clarify a couple of lifestyle choices. I live in the city. I live next door to where I work.
Literally.
Not not metaphorical.
Not a kilometre away.
No.
But
I live at 198 and I work at 200. I don't own a car. I have a yacht, and I catch the tram from my house to my yacht, and usually spend Friday and Saturday night on the yacht with my son. And every Thursday night, don't bother calling me, because I'll be out sailing with my very close friends, where we drink and sail and solve all the world's problems, and then forget the next day. And so we have to do it all again the next week.
I think. So we talk about success and where to from here, but the end of your description there, well, you're already there.
Nah.
No. Boat, sailing. Well, so what is it? Is it doing that thing 7 days a week?
Well, I have 5 children and 3 grandchildren. So, 5 sons and daughters and 3 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
My youngest son is 11, and he's just learning viola and going through the con, and there's a bit of a prodigy there. He's just amazing, and they all are. So Samuel's got he's gone through different careers. He's been a chef. He worked for me in the studio for a while as a technician. He's studied and qualified chef. He's now a qualified nurse, and he has two lovely sons. And down here in South Australia, working very, very hard and raising a family. And then I have Frances, who's a fine artist, and she won the medal for the University for Fine Art a few years back. And her partner are living here in Adelaide. Frances is working in different government organisations, and also working in her passion, which is her ceramics. Maddie, who is a project officer and worked for various councils and done amazing work in those areas. She's raising her little boy at the moment, and so the next generation is coming through. And then Sebastian's 21. He's just going to university at the moment, studying social work there, and they are the ones that inspire me. They're the ones that I realise that I've worked hard, but how I've been able to create these amazing people, that's something that you don't design, it just happens. And
it's a bit of effort. You've got 2 pretty amazing kids. I've got 2 amazing. So I've got a Sebastian as well, who's doing his PhD in psychology, and my Jeremy is doing. He's just finished his film degree, and so creative in many ways, and yours are creative. So I think you're right. It's the level of success we can measured by the product of your life, and the product of my life is my kids.
But I also. I tease them all by saying I'm truly immortal now because I have 3 grandchildren. So it's going to be certain that there's going to be one that's going to
being in design.
That's very good.
No. I don't know about design. Just as long as they continue the lineage, that's all that's important.
Yes, that's great. Yeah. Immortality. Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you guys.
It's been inspirational. Thank you so much for coming.
It's been great, and thank you for the chance to talk about this stuff.
Design's important.
It is. It's very important, but it's also important for people to listen to what we have to say.
Yeah. Indeed.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Chiron Audio or DesignLeadership and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you are more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au. Many thanks goes to our producer, Marcus Franks, and our editor, Jeremy Devison. Make sure you hit subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Please take the time to leave us a comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Tales from the Top.